We have a really great panel today to talk about girls basketball. Our first panelist is Lori Witt. Lori Witt earned her PhD in history from the Loyola University Chicago in 2001 with an emphasis on American cultural history. She has been teaching full-time at Central College in Pella, Iowa since 2003, where she teaches survey courses in U.S. history as well as topical courses on the history of sports and American culture and U.S. popular culture. She is also a faculty athletic representative at Central. She has served on the board of the State Historical Society of Iowa since 2017 and is currently our board's vice president. So thank you for your work with us. She's a Wisconsin native who, while traveling with her college choir tour in the spring of 1981, sang in Ankeny on a girls' tournament night. Her host family could not wait to get home and had to get home fast enough to watch the game, and that's how she learned of the tremendous popularity of Iowa girls basketball. So thank you, Lori. Our next presenter and panelist today is Gerri Dearth. So thank you. Gerri Dearth attended Maquoketa Valley High School in Delhi, Iowa from 1968 to 1972, where she excelled in softball, track and field, and basketball. Dearth started every game of all 4 seasons of her high school basketball career, amassing an impressive 3,333 career points in 100 games, which puts her 52nd among Iowa's 6-on-6 scoring leaders. Good work. Dearth continued her athletic and academic pursuits at Luther College, where she was a 2-year letter winner in softball and a 4-year letter winner in basketball. She set the Luther basketball scoring record with 836 points. After college, Dearth went on to teach and coach briefly and walk-on in Buffalo Center schools before spending 34 years teaching and coaching at Apple Valley High School in Apple Valley, Minnesota. Dearth coached cross country for 8 years, served as an assistant basketball coach for 33 years, including 1 year as head coach, and led the track and field team for all of her 34 years there. Her girls' track and field teams won 15 section titles, 10 conference championships, and 5 state championships as well. She coached 25 individual state champions and 1 Olympian. She was named Minnesota High School Coaches Association Section Coach of the Year 15 times, True Team Track and Field Coach of the Year 10 times, Minnesota Track and Field Coach of the Year twice, and in 2007, the National Track and Field Coach of the Year. Dearth was inducted into the Luther College Hall of Fame for basketball and softball, and Hall of Fames for the Minnesota High School League and Minnesota High School Coaches Association, and the Minnesota High School Track and Field Coaches Association. In 2014, Dearth retired from coaching teaching. She was married to Rod Dearth, a Luther College All-American track and field athlete and fellow educator and coach who passed away in March 2021. They had 3 children, all of whom were super sport athletes at Apple Valley High School who wanted to excel in college athletics. Dearth now enjoys her lake home in Lakeville, Minnesota. So please help me welcome Gerri. Susan Orvis is our next panelist. Growing up in Stanwood, Iowa, Susan Orvis achieved standout success in high school girls 6-on-6 girls basketball from 1989 to 1993, earning multiple All-Mid-East Conference and All-State honors while leading Lincoln Community High School to a 74-11 record and being named the 1993 Quad City Times Athlete of the Year. She earned 2 Mid-East Conference Offensive Player of the Year awards and finished with 3,521 career points, 40th in Iowa's all-time 6-on-6 rankings. She went on to play for the Hawkeyes at the University of Iowa, where she was a 4-year letter winner, team captain, and member of the 2 Big Ten championship teams, earning 3 All-Big Ten academic honors and a Chris Rogers Memorial Scholarship. Following her collegiate playing career, Orvis transitioned to coaching, serving as assistant coach to Ashland University, UMKC, and Southern Illinois University, where the team won the Missouri Valley Conference Championship. From 2009 to 2021, Orvis coached at Muscatine High School, earning 3 Mississippi Athletic Conference Coach of the Year awards and leading the team to the Iowa State Girls Basketball Tournament. Currently, she works for Magnify Consulting alongside her husband Nate, where they support business, ministry, and athletic teams with interpersonal and team development. Orvis also serves as executive assistant at the Calvary Church in Muscatine, Iowa. So help me welcome Susan. Our last panelist is Lisa Bluder. Lisa Bluder spent 24 seasons with the P. Sue Beckwith, MD, head women's basketball coach at the University of Iowa. She is an all-time winningest coach in Big Ten history with an overall record of 528 to 254. And a Big Ten. And a Big Ten record of 262 to 145. Under her leadership, the Hawkeyes advanced the last 2 national championships games and made 22 postseason appearances overall, including 14 of the last 16 NCAA tournaments. Bluder led the Hawkeyes to 5 Big Ten tournament titles and 2 shared Big Ten regular season championships. Bluder was the Naismith National Coach of the Year in 2019, 3-time Big Ten Coach of the Year, 2001, 2008, 2010, 3-time WBCA Regional Coach of the Year in 2001, 2008, 2018, and 2019, and had posted a winning record in 23 of her 24 years at Iowa, including 18 upper division finishes in the Big Ten Conference. She had the 3rd most victories among active coaches in Division I women's college basketball when she retired in 2014. Bluder began her coaching career as head coach at St. Ambrose University for 6 seasons, followed by a 10-year head coaching stint at Drake. Bluder and the Bulldogs won 4 Missouri Valley Conference championships and 3 regular season titles. Before her illustrious coaching career, Bluder was a standout forward in 6-on-6 at Linn-Mar High School in Marion. She wanted to become a 3rd-year starter for the University of Northern Iowa's women's basketball team, playing an astonishing 108 games, averaging 9.6 points and 4.8 rebounds per game. During her playing career, Bluder climbed her way to the top of the Panther record books. Her 31 games played in the season ties her with 2 other teammates. Her 19 rebounds against Illinois Chicago is the 2nd highest in school history. During her playing days at UNI, Bluder teams compiled 57-30 record. She was inducted into UNI Athletic Hall of Fame in 2000. The same year, she was introduced as the University of Iowa's new women's head basketball coach. So help me welcome Lisa Bluder to our panel. And now on to our moderator and my colleague. Our moderator today is Rachel Hansen, who serves as our history education specialist here at the museum. She's also the managing editor of the Annals of Iowa, which is our quarterly history journal as well. Hansen holds a Bachelor of Arts in History from the University of Iowa and a Master of Arts in Geography from the University of Northern Iowa. She began her teaching and her coaching career in the Fort Dodge Community School District and most recently served as a Social Studies Department Chair at Muscatine High School, where she also had the privilege to serve under girls basketball head coach Susan Orvis. That connection is there, isn't it? Growing up in Buffalo Center, Hansen remembers playing 6-on-6 basketball in Coach Smith's PE classes, and she's convinced that these lessons propelled her University of Iowa's 3-on-3 women's basketball team to an intramural championship in 2005. Hansen comes from a long line of 6-on-6 players and coaches. Her dad was scouting the night that Lynn Lorenzen scored 100 points against Woden Crystal Lake in 1986. Her aunt Gwen played a 1988 6-on-6 girls state basketball tournament. Her cousin Carol was a standout forward for Correctionville from 1958 to 1962. And her grandmother, Wilma Rel, was a power forward for Cushing High School in the late 1930s. Needless to say, Rachel is thrilled to talk hoops today, and we'll spend the next hour with these great 6-on-6 legends. So let's give everyone a round of applause.
For being here. Do I have a live mic? You can hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Wow, what an introduction. What an impressive bunch of panelists. I hope you all enjoyed the film. The group that we have in front of us are often in the spotlight for their coaching efforts, which they're all incredibly humble and quick to divert that spotlight to others, their team, their players, but we get to shine that spotlight on them directly this afternoon for an hour and talk about their time playing. As 6-on-6 players. We can trace it across 3 different generations. And so I guess where I'd like to begin is, when did you start playing basketball? And Gerri, we can start with you if you want to talk about, when did you first start playing? When did you start playing 6-on-6?
Is that because I'm the oldest?
Yeah, we have to start at the beginning and work our way up.
Well, I grew up in Earlville, Iowa, real close to Field of Dreams. And I grew up with 3 older brothers and 2 older sisters, and I was the baby of the family. So as my one brother and sister are here today, but we had a hoop out in the backyard. And by the time I got there, 5 years after all of them, I think our hoop was probably 10 feet, 6 inches or 11 feet because they had played in it so much. So I started at a very young age because that's all I knew out on the farm. And then as we progressed, my dad had a corn crib, tore the corn crib down and made a flat slab for myself and my teammates to come play. And that's how it all started. So yeah, it was way back when I was real little. I don't remember anything different like in the movie. I grew up with basketball. That's what I remember.
Yes, I grew up in small town Stanwood, Iowa, and honestly my first memories of playing any basketball at all was the old school Nerf hoop on the top of the doorway. And we played in my bedroom when I was 5, and then I remember halftime of the Iowa men's games, we would watch those when we only had 3 channels. And at halftime we'd have a family game. And after that, my uncle was the girls basketball coach at Lincoln High School, so you grow up kind of walking into the gym and being around the gym when the girls were practicing. That was the first time I'd ever seen 6-on-6 basketball and what was maybe coming next. And I remember very clearly the Christmas our parents and my mom got us a basketball hoop and we put it up in the front driveway. And it was pretty neat. Those were the days too. We had small driveways, some gravel. We had to shoot eventually over the cable wire, things like that. But that's kind of where it all started. I spent hours and hours in that driveway and kind of grew up there and just followed along the path. So very much enjoyed that experience.
I grew up in Marion, and my 2 older brothers, my dad put up the hoop for them, and they never played it, and I wore it out. And so I loved it. It was just a way for me to pass time when I was young, you know, before Xbox and all the things that they do now. That's what we did. I loved being outside. I loved competing, and I really didn't know there was a difference between 6-on-6 and 5-on-5. I remember I went to my 4th grade and we were playing basketball and I was dribbling down the court and I kept getting whistled for traveling because I was dribbling too much. And I'd only played with boys, so I didn't know there was a 6-on-6 until, you know, well into my 4th grade year, I finally learned that, oh, girls play differently than boys. I didn't know that beforehand.
So was there an organized basketball in your community? Do you remember watching girls playing growing up? You know, in the documentary they mentioned Iowa is unique in that there are generations of women in your family who may have played. So do you remember being young and there being this like team that you were hoping to make in high school?
Well, my mother played in the 1930s when there were 3 courts, the forwards, guards, and rovers in the middle. And so she had her articles and everything. So I grew up with basketball. As far as organized communities like they have AAU now and any of that, no, not whatsoever. So my first recollection was middle school, and I had my coach, and after middle school she challenged me, if you shoot 100 shots every day, I'll bet you could start on the varsity team. And so I guess that was some goals, always a goal-oriented person. And so yeah, like I say, I grew up with basketball. My sister's here, she was 4 or 5 years ahead of me, and I looked up to her and I wanted to play too, so.
Yeah, my mom played, and I always heard growing up what a feisty little guard she was. So that was pretty fun to follow her, and then of course with my uncle being coached, like I alluded to before, I was in the gym shooting on the side baskets, I guess, and kind of seeing what would be next down the line. I think when it came to how to get there, it's not like we just went out in the driveway and played 6-player rules. In the small town, we kind of had a little bit of a sandlot group, and my twin sister and I, we played with the neighborhood boys, and we had a great group of friends and buddies, and we played whatever sport was in season. When we played basketball with the boys, we played the boys' rules. So it was very much you kind of practiced that way, and then when it came time to play your official season, whatever age you were in, middle school, high school, whatever, we just kind of adapted to 6-player and tried to, you know, play a little bit different style. And it worked out. It was fun.
Well, my parents moved here from England, so they did not play. I didn't know the tradition of, Iowa basketball or anything like that. But I just had a lot of energy, and they put me in the Salvation Army League, I think, just to get rid of me, like get her out of the house. She's tearing it apart. So that's how I kind of started with the Salvation Army League. And then in junior high, that's when I got to see the high school players play, and I really, and watching the '76 Olympics, that was like, I want to do that type of thing.
Absolutely. Dr. Witt, I'm hoping you can give us some historical context here. So in 1920, we have the first organized Iowa girls state tournament. And by the way, the score was 11-4, Correctionville over Nevada. What a big game, right? So it came along, we've come a long way since 1920. But 5 years later, the union votes to disband. This is inappropriate, it's unhealthy for girls, and 25 administrators, we heard in the film, come together in an attempt to save girls basketball, mostly from rural communities. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to, in the 1920s, as we're starting to grow the sport, what are kind of the social attitudes that people have about girls in athletics?
So you would think that, like the 1920s, I think of as an age of advances for women. I think of the new woman, the flapper. The flapper wasn't necessarily athletic, but she was just a new sort of feature on the historical scene, But in the 20s, also women had been playing basketball for a while, and the college, there were different organizations. There was AAU basketball, there were industrial leagues, factory teams, all of these things. And a lot of them played, or did not necessarily play girls' rules or the 6-on-6. Some of them played 5-on-5. They often had like beauty contests associated with the games. And so there were women PE teachers in college. They kind of formed their own organizations. They at first worked through an organization called the National Association of Amateur, the NAAF, and they were the women's division of the National Amateur Athletic Federation. And they came up with rules that, or they came up with the idea, they kind of promoted the idea that girls basketball, competitive girls basketball was not a good idea. They thought that it was too rough, too aggressive. Girls were becoming maybe too much like men. They didn't like the uniforms. They wanted them to cover them more. And so they really, their idea was, and it wasn't all bad, it might sound really bad, but it wasn't all bad, but they wanted everyone to participate, but they didn't want it to be competitive, because competition they thought was too rough and too unladylike. And so their ideas kind of take over in the colleges and in high schools, and a lot of high schools and colleges started to go away from a competitive game, even if it was a 6-on-6 game. Conversely, men are starting to form conferences, collegiate conferences, high school conferences. They're playing the conference schedule and the tournament really meant something. But in a lot of high schools and a lot of colleges, they were going away from that, and they would have strong intramurals, they would have play days where you maybe played a game against another school, but then you would have tea or have dinner afterwards or something. So it was meant to be good sportsmanship and good fellowship and all of that. And in Iowa, in 1925, so a lot of states are going away from competitive basketball. In Iowa, these 25 superintendents, coaches, teachers came together and said they rebelled, right? They wanted to play basketball, girls basketball meant something to their communities. I think the superintendent at Audubon was the one that really was sort of spearheaded this, and they had just won state tournaments the last 2 or 3 years, and so, they had a stake in it. And so they, unlike in many other places, they just ignored what these college female PE teachers were saying and said, we're going to play. And so, and they kept it alive then for small towns and whoever wanted to play in Iowa.
And this Iowa Girls High School Association becomes the only association dedicated to women in sports, and it remains that way today. And so that was a huge piece of promoting girls in sports. Now you mentioned they didn't, around the country, they didn't want it to be too competitive. From what I've read in the newspapers, I've been doing some historical searches from your playing days, it was anything but not competitive. So I would like to indulge. I've got a few specific questions. I'd like to bring up some highlights and some stats. Susan, you know, you taught me well to carry the stats. I've got my notes, but I didn't pull them out of the back of my pocket. But Susan, we're going to start with you. In the Class 1A Regional in 1992, you scored 46 points in a 73-78 loss to Midland. Your twin sister, Amy, contributed 17. That put the family at a total of 63 for Lincoln Community of the 73 points that night for your team. So I'm just wondering, can you speak a bit first about the role of the shooting forward, and particularly the way it worked on your team? You were a sharpshooter, to say the least. And second, what was it like playing with your twin sister, Amy? Were there any shenanigans with, were you identical? Was it hard to keep you apart? Did that play into the game plan? So.
Yes. I think your first question in regards to the role of the shooting forward, I felt a little spoiled because you do get a lot of shots. And I do think even, certainly, you know, around the game of basketball on the offensive side of the ball, a lot, especially when you're coaching too, has to do with spacing. And I think the 3-on-3 game offensively is very different than a 5-on-5 game. There's room to operate, and reads can be made, and you know, defense, if they bring help, those decisions are just a little simpler and easier. And I just think we had a lot of room to operate. I think also, and it could be a fast-paced game. I think my senior year they did an average time of possession for us, and we were between 8 and 9 seconds before we took a shot, and that was pretty normal for higher-scoring teams, which also lent itself to some strategies of slow down and standing around and things that you always dreaded if the other team was going to try to slow the pace a little bit. I think also offensively you get into some of those, I call them bonus free throws, where if there was a foul at the defensive end of the floor, if you were in the bonus, you got to select which player would shoot free throws. And I was the beneficiary of a lot of free throws where I was not the one getting fouled. I was plenty rested because I was standing there, and I got to step up and shoot a lot of freebies, certainly on that end of the floor. And yeah, it was just a really unique way to play the game when you think about it. I think playing with my twin sister and in a small town, certainly you're playing with all the families and best friends that you kind of grow up with. But it was a unique blessing to play with my twin sister, Amy. We are identical. First and foremost, we didn't have the unhealthy sibling rivalry. We were always so for each other, so that was just fun. We never really got sideways with each other in any way, really even that much at home, except maybe over for a wet first shower after practice. So that was about as intense as it got that way. But I would say playing with her, certainly you think about playing with people you're familiar playing with. It's not just that we had every practice together from grade school up. We had every driveway session together, every one-on-one, every shooting workout, every sport, whatever. And certainly you're going to pick up on each other's nuances of the game, but I will say there is a little something to the twin thing. You know, if she stubs her toe, I'm not going to sit here and feel it, but at the same time, I could read her. She knows we knew when we were zigging and zagging, and I think that did help us just a little bit, besides just playing our whole lives together. And I think probably something with siblings that gets overlooked when you're teammates is how you can communicate on the floor. When you're teenage girls, we could be very direct with each other in competitive, heated moments. We could address each other very directly without feelings getting hurt, without causing those kinds of challenges that happens with peers at that age. So I think looking back, we could pretty much get to the heart of the matter out there with what was going on and solve the issue pretty easily playing with my sister, and we had that way to communicate. So we had a ball. It was fun, and just loved sharing my whole high school career with Amy.
And Amy was a great athlete in her own right, goes on to Drake to play volleyball, and I believe over one Christmas break, maybe at Iowa, may have briefly stepped in for you at practice. Did swap. Tried to pull one over on Coach Stringer, I think. Yeah. Thought, well, let's see how this goes.
Yes, I'll tell you how Yes, Amy did go on to play volleyball at Drake, which made life easy for my mom, because she could come and watch Amy in the fall, me in the winter, and back to Amy in the spring. And my sophomore year, I knew better than to pull that off my freshman year, because I had enough to deal with that year. But at the same time, my sophomore year over Christmas break, those stretches can get kind of long. You're in the middle of the year, and our assistant coaches and some of my teammates just thought it would be super big fun to see if we could pull a fast one on Coach Stringer, who's usually pretty serious when it came to practice time. And so we did the whole thing, you know, put her in my practice gear. The girls, put her hair up as close to mine as possible. And we have a practice from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And I was up in the Carver Hawkeye Arena stands, hiding over the tunnel. So when the coaches came out, I was behind them, and I was literally between there and press row, just kind of peeking over, because whenever this was going to happen, whatever we thought was going to happen, I was going to get the quick, get back in here, Amy was going to be out, and that's how it was going to go. And lo and behold, here they come, and everybody's just trying to hold it together. And Vivian walks in, business, which was the name of the game when you're between the lines with Vivian. And all that to say, she knew right away. And Amy was on the far side of the court. She didn't say anything. And we started getting up and down to get loose, all those kind of early practice drills. And Coach Stringer's just sitting there, just watching. And I'm up in the stands, peeking over, going, oh boy, I don't know that this was really a great idea. And this goes on for 3 or 4 drills. And then typically, we would do our offense towards the end of practice. Coach Stringer changes the script and says, okay guys, we're time to go to our dry offense, let's get it going. And the whole team just is like, well, dry offense was you go through all your plays, sets, actions, or whatnot without defense. Well, Amy, playing volleyball at Drake and just happened to be in town, wouldn't know any of this. And so my teammates were like, you know, over here, Sue, come on, Sue. And they're getting through this whole thing. And Amy had played enough basketball to track the action, and they did okay. And meanwhile, I'm out there going, it's been like 25 minutes. I need to get into practice. Well, all this is going on, and finally we had 7 freshmen that year. One of them made a lackadaisical mistake, which is not popular with Coach Stringer, and it was all of a sudden, it was like, okay, this joke's over. And I get the quick, Amy sprints up the tunnel, I come down the stairs, and I hop on the baseline with everybody who's ready to run, and just started running. And then for the next 3.5 hours, we were all like, this was a terrible idea. We set her off like this. I mean, what were we thinking? And I'm going, oh man, this is, yeah. So anyway, at the end of the whole practice, it's 1 o'clock, we step off the floor. We were kind of, just regretting what we had done. And, Coach Stringer steps off like on to the next part of her day. That's just what she did. She flipped the switch and was ready to go up to the office. And one of my teammates grabbed her and was like, Coach Stringer, didn't you not know, like, Susan's sister Amy was in practice? And she stops. And she said, well, of course I knew that Amy was in practice first. I knew right away. I knew by the way she runs. I knew by the way she passes. I knew by the way she does everything that was not Susan. And she said, secondly, I just wanted to see. I just wanted to see how she would adapt. I wanted to see how your teammates were going to communicate and talk her through all of the things. That's why I switched the drill. So it became some grand psychological experiment. Asked me what was it like playing for Coach Stringer. That's one of the first stories I tell, because that's how she was. She was always operating in some kind of educational, how do I learn, how do I teach the game, playing. But the joke was totally on us. She walked up the tunnel and we were like, that did not go. We thought it would go, but it makes for a good story today. And I apologize for the length, but that's what happens. That's a good story.
That's one of the best. Those are the ones we don't get to hear. Yeah. So Gerri, you started every varsity game of your high school playing career, freshman through senior year, but that was not without hardship. So I've got a blurb here from the 1970 Old Wine Daily Register. After a 59-52 win over Starmont in district play, they said the real hard luck kid who showed lots of spunk was Gerri Grimm, who injured her knee very badly but had enough grit to stick out the game under obvious pain. So I'm wondering if you can share a bit about, what position did you play for Maquoketa Valley? What style of play was your team known for? And how did you grind it out all 4 years?
Okay, let's
See, I can remember that like it was yesterday, really. Believe it or not, as forwards, we did have to play a little bit of defense, which I wasn't a fan of. But give me the ball, I want to shoot. You know, that was my mentality. But so the guards had intercepted the ball, and I was going to try to block it from going across to the other side of the court. And I remember I came down, and I thought, I can't go on that line. And I went on the line, and my knee just gave up. And yeah, it was painful. But I think back in the day, you just play with a lot of heart, and you just do it. You just do it. And so I remember we won that game, and then we had to go on. And you saw West Central up here a lot? Yeah, that's who we always had to face in the finals or the semifinals. And they were amazing. They were a great team. And so I remember getting, back in the day, even shot up with cortisone and Novocaine, getting all taped up, and went out and played the next game. And that's when I think we hit West Central, or Wapsie Valley. If any of you remember Wapsie Valley, they were very strong teams. So I guess I didn't know any better. You just do it. And I have no idea how you found that statistic out of the low line register or whatever. It's like, whoa. And Rachel, thanks for putting this together too. We appreciate this. It's a fun panel, and it's great to meet these wonderful ladies. And so I guess just with a lot of heart, and you just do it. You just do it.
So Coach Bluder, another physical game. So you could have compared maybe to this Starmont game that we talked about with Gerri. It's your junior year at Linn-Mar. You defeated rival Prairie 78-70. The newspaper says it was a very physical game. There were a remarkable 58 fouls, which seems like a lot, whether it's 6-on-6 or 5-on-6. That's a lot of fouls. You lost to Prairie twice earlier in the season, and your coach Larry Schroeder said after the game, there were a lot of fouls called tonight, and our reserves really came through. You scored 23 points that night, second on the team, and you fouled out with 4 minutes to play. That's exactly what I was thinking. I think I called Susan ahead of time, and my Aunt Gwen, and I said, I've watched a lot of 6-on-6 film on YouTube, but Coach Bluder was a forward. Is it disrespectful to ask how does a forward foul out of a basketball? So here we are. So how did you foul out? But also, were those offensive fouls, defensive fouls? Was the game called differently than it is now? Wondering if you can speak a bit about that game and those fouls.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact game. I remember beating Prairie, but I don't remember the exact situation. But I do remember fouling out. I feel like they were offensive fouls that I just, lack of body control maybe. I don't know, but yeah, that seems kind of crazy because I think we got 6 fouls, didn't we?
Oh, yeah.
We had 6.
It happened.
And it's like 32 minutes. Out 28 minutes. Okay, now they have the ball half the time, so now we're talking 14 minutes. That's a foul every minute. Jeez, get her on the bench. That's what I would say.
That's the amount of fouls. Now, you can all speak to this maybe. Was the game called differently? I mean, could you take the ball away? Was that a foul? Was that instant foul? How was the game called differently?
Well, I remember the defense could only tie the ball up in the 3-second lane, or in the lane. So they really couldn't tie it up. But when they were bringing it back, of course, it was our mission to get it back on our end. And so, yeah, we played pretty aggressively, Rachel.
I believe you. I know. I've seen you play bags. I believe you. I believe you played physically. Yeah, that's a non-contact sport. Could you all speak a little bit about some of the rivalries you faced? Gerri, you mentioned some that you faced in that district play, and in the film you said there were these notable defenders that you would just run up against. So any rivals or any memorable
I do
players?
have to share this, and hopefully there's some young women and girls out here that will see this. But we had to play Denver, Iowa, in a section championship or something. And there's a picture that I had, and I was taking a left-handed kind of hook layup over this gal, and I thought the Cedar Rapids Gazette said Grimm scores over Old Troggy. Well, back in the day, she was a defender. She was about 6'1", 6'2". Back in the day, Cedar Rapids Gazette said, I thought it said Grimm scores over Old Troggy, which I think it was. But anyway, they had an East-West All-Star game back in the day. And this gal, who was the defender, was picked to go to this East-West All-Star game. And we were out in Clear Lake, Iowa, or Spirit Lake, Iowa, somewhere back in 1972. And she came up to me and she said, I'm gonna get choked up here. She came up to me and said, are you going to Luther College? And I said, yeah. And her and I are the bestest friends ever. And I just spent a whole week with her down in Oklahoma City just this summer. So I guess one of my toughest defenders became one of my absolute best friends and roommate in college for 3 years. So opponents can become very great friends if you have the right attitude and everything. So.
Yeah, rivalries. I think even just competing and playing in those days was very different because we didn't speak with and talk to opposing players and teams like kids do now. You know, they're friends with people because of the phones and all the extra basketball that they play. So you really didn't know your opponents. You just knew who you played on Friday night, and usually it was competitive, and that was the context. And so there were some pretty good rivalries, and they were kind of the enemy that way. And yet at the same time, I would say you referred to Midland in that regional final. They were in our league, and we always went head-to-head, whether it was during the year, in the postseason, and it was really because of style of play. We like to play fast, and they had a 6'2" post player. And no matter what, the only shot they were going to take the entire game was a right-handed layup from the right block over the 6'2" player's right shoulder, and they would pass the ball around over and over and over until they got her on the block. And that made for a really hard game plan for us. It was always a nip and tuck. It was hard to play it. I didn't enjoy that game, and it was ultra competitive. So we had some knockdown dragouts with that, but that was always a memorable rivalry. And I think we got the best of each other about right down the middle half of the time. But it made for some good fun and good competitions.
I just, I never made it to the state tournament, and that was, still to this day, it hurts. Like,
I agree.
I wanted to be in the state tournament so badly. And somebody that was featured in the video was Bob Mullins, and he actually ended my career in high school. He was the coach at Regis at the time, Cedar Rapids Regis, and I believe we were one game from state, although I can't remember for sure. And so Bob was the end of my career. Another person I remember guarded me a lot was Mickey Schilling. I don't know if anybody remembers that name. She was a great tennis player from Cedar Rapids, LaSalle, and actually became the tennis coach at Iowa for a minute. Was ranked in the top 100 women's tennis players in the nation. But she guarded me, and we used to have a great time talking at half court when the ball was on the other end, which was kind of a unique thing that you did in 6-on-6.
You mentioned the state tournament. The pageantry that came with the state tournament kind of made it iconic. You saw the young men in tuxedos sweeping the floor, which I can remember, going to games in the early 90s, watching 6-on-6. Dr. Witt, can you talk a little bit about, Ewayne Cooley and his emphasis on the state tournament and the Iowa girl, and how it really made Iowa basketball a whole brand of its own?
Yes, Ewayne Cooley became the director, the president of the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union in 1954, and it was the girls basketball was doing well before he took over, but he thought it could be better, and he had a little bit more of a business mindset, but he also was a great lover of speech and the arts, like music, band, all those things in high school. And I think he thought that, based on what I've seen and what I've heard, that he thought more could be made of that state tournament. And it so happens after he became director, or he became president, they decided to move the state tournament from the Drake Fieldhouse to the Betts Auditorium, which was a difference of about 11,000 people, or 10,000 people, right? The Drake Fieldhouse sat 5,000 people, Betts had 15,000 people, so he had to figure out how to get people to come. And he was they loved girls basketball, right? But how to get more people to come. So he instituted the halftime shows, which would feature, as you saw, pom-pom squads, dance teams, band. We didn't see the bands so much, but bands, acrobats, all kinds of kids. And my experience, so I'm a Wisconsin native. But my experience, my kids were born in Iowa. They've been in Iowa since 1993. My experience with kids in high school is, you know, marching band and show choir and all those things that kids do, and as a good parent, following all of them. And so Ewayne Cooley not only knew he could bank on getting the girls' basketball fans there, but all the parents for the kids who were in those halftime shows. So that was, he was just a good, first of all, a promoter, but then also, I mean, it was, as he said, he had a love affair with the Iowa girl who played basketball, and I think he really loved Iowa girls basketball and thought it was special, and he just brought it to new heights. So it was he definitely deserves all the awards he got for that.
Yeah, left his mark on the game, and in many other areas of other sports, I think. Girls basketball drew attention to all sports.
And it actually made the money then that helped fund a lot of the other girls' sports too, that state tournament did, so, yeah.
So Iowa plays 6-on-6. There are other states that play the game. Do you want to speak a bit about, you know, it was Texas, Oklahoma. Talk a little bit about other states that played 6-on-6 and how Iowa had its own unique flavor.
Well, I think that Iowa 6-on-6 got well, I think in Cooley, they just had, the Cooley and the small towns, other states had small towns too, but I think that they just had much more promotion and family buy-in and maybe ability to get to games or get people to games no matter how they would do it, whichever way. And so maybe statewide there was just more support than there were in other states. They were some of the few, Oklahoma and Texas especially, that played it the longest. But, well, Iowa was second longest, and then Oklahoma, I think in 1995, played their last 6-on-6 game. But it just, I mean, well, the video says it so well, or shows it so well, that, you know, towns would empty and people would all come, and I don't really know if they had quite the same ability to do that in Oklahoma or Texas. They played a little different rules that we were talking about. You played Oklahoma as a high schooler. They had a game with Oklahoma, and how the rules were a little bit different. But so I don't know if, you know, that might have had something to do with it too. The way the Iowa women played might have been more appealing to people. But, I don't know. I think that the support was definitely here. People would follow no matter what.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned Oklahoma. Susan, in high school, I believe your senior year, you play an interstate game against Oklahoma, who played 2 years past Iowa. The game ends in '93 in Iowa. It goes on to '95 in Oklahoma. Do you want to talk about that game, about how the rules were different?
Yeah, it was a unique opportunity. They took a mix of us seniors down to Oklahoma, and it was kind of fun. We played a couple exchange games. We played one game with the Oklahoma rules, and then we played one game with the Iowa rules, and it was really unique. And probably the best way to describe it without getting too much into the weeds is the Oklahoma version was more like the boys' game. So you had unlimited dribbles, you could, strip the ball, the 5-second rule. I think you had to advance the ball from, if there was a score, it did not get advanced to the center circle. If I remember, that's the part I can't remember 100%. But it was more like the boys' game with a split court, is what I take from that. But it was interesting. We went to play our rules with the 2 dribbles and the way they started. The Oklahoma girls looked at us like, what on earth? And we understood. I mean, it was easier for us to adapt because most of us played with boys. And we just had to stop at half court, whereas for them, it was a major adjustment. But it did teach me, like, wow, this game that we play is really unique.
I don't even know how the ref would call, how they refed that game. 2 different sets.
Yeah, bring some Iowa officials.
Maybe we should have. I think we ended up splitting, but yeah.
Now there are some other major rule changes that happened. I'm curious if it affected any of you at all. In '82, they add the 3-point field goal, so this changes the game. In '85, they introduced the women's ball. So I'm curious, do you remember playing with a different size ball? What's it like playing before the 3-point line versus after?
none of those had any effect with me because I'm old, maybe not. Young at heart, young at heart. No, I wish they would have had the three-point line. That would have been fun. And then the small ball, I really didn't even have any recollection of that until I started coaching up in Minnesota. And I go, whoa, this is a smaller ball. So it had no repercussion on my playing.
Yeah, I was playing college in '82, and I don't think we brought in the three-point line in college. Maybe they did in high school, but I do not, in my senior year, remember having a three-point line. In '84, I was actually coaching at St. Ambrose, and they brought in the smaller ball. And at first, I wasn't an advocate of that because I thought, well, that's, you know, we play against the boys. Now, whose ball are we going to use, you know? It's like, I didn't really like it, but then after a while I got used to it, and I think it did help the girls because our hands are not as big as the guys, and we were able to control it a little bit better as far as ball handling and passing and that sort of thing.
Okay, another important equipment question. What were your uniforms like, and what shoes did you wear? Were these Chucks? We were in the pre-Nike age? Gerri, your uniform is down here. I can't believe you didn't wear it on stage.
It shrunk in the closet, let me tell you. A lot. It shrunk.
Kind of X-rated, I think. I've been telling you. They showed a lot of nipples back then.
Yes, here we go. I love my Coconut Valley Wildcats. There we go. Put a little collar. Yeah.
Still pulling off, Gerri. I really think so.
So those were our uniforms. A lot of the schools still did the little pleated skirts, which was fun to see. And then, of course, shoes. We knew none other than my hand-me-down Converse that I had from my sisters and brothers. So that was our equipment. Yeah. Oh golly, someday I might fit back in. I'll work on that.
Halloween's coming up.
Oh yes, the socks. We were talking about that, Susan, the high socks that you wore up there, striping sometimes.
Yeah. I don't have anything quite as great as that. I think probably the difference for us probably in the late 80s, early 90s was you had that one set of uniforms. You had the whites and the darks, and you wore them all 4 years. And you were lucky if they were new at some point any time in those 4 years. So I give my teams and my niece and nephew a hard time because I just marvel at the gear and the amounts of sets of uniforms that kids get these days. But it was polyester, it was short, and you wore it every minute you were in the program. So,
Yeah, we used ours for volleyball too. We used the same uniform for volleyball. So we lived in it for like 6 months. I had Converse, the high top Converse, until my senior year. Nike came, and I got a pair of white Nikes with a red stripe. Yeah, it was a Christmas present.
Clean. Nice. So you all go on from the 6-player game to college, where it's an entirely different game. I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about the challenges of making that shift to the 5-player game, especially when you've got to up the level of competition. It's not just high schoolers now you're competing against your upper level. So what was that transition like from the high school game to the college?
It was a switch. I'm not a defensive specialist. I had to slide your feet a little bit more. It was quite, it was hard. I have to admit it was hard. Had to do a little bit more conditioning, which I didn't particularly like, mind drills. But you just did it because you love the game. You just did it.
Yeah, I thought it was hard. I'm going to let Susan go last because I think she had maybe one of the harder adjustments just because she was playing for a coach that didn't understand 6-on-6. But when I went to UNI, my first year was just a complete waste. I mean, I couldn't, I didn't know what was going on. And I think the bell kind of finally turned at the end of my freshman year that I figured the game out. But it took a long time. But Susan, I think, go ahead.
Yeah, you say it took time. I wish I'd have been more patient with myself learning. Coach Stringer was a defensive coach, and you didn't see the floor unless you could get up to speed with the defense. And I had a lot to learn, and I think the first thing when you jump up to that level is, on either side of the ball, at that level, I was not going to be the biggest, fastest, strongest athlete. So not only do you have to learn to play defense, you have to learn to play it wisely. You have to play angles. You have to play of fishing. You have to know the scouting report. So it was a lot to digest in addition to getting into the kind of condition and strength that was going to be demanded. I think probably, a story is the first we had to learn to get over on-ball screens. And never having done it really that much, you just didn't do that when you played growing up, you just played. But I had the first 2 on-ball screens I ever had to get over were my teammates and dear friends, but it was 6'5" Kathy Marks and 6'4" Jenny Noel Furness. And to keep up at that clip and try to step over big, strong posts, those were as big of on-ball screens as you're going to see. And I did not do that very well and very consistently, and those Carver Hawkeye Arena stairs are an amazing teacher. Enough history that was before the railings were there. I got to visit and revisit those stairs for a while. Gerri, I could have tried out for one of your track teams. My freshman year, I was in pretty good condition, but that's how you learned. And I think probably hard at the time, and hard on the confidence at the time, but then when you go to coach, it ended up being valuable because all of a sudden, you go to that other level and things used to come pretty easily. It was a challenge. I was like, I've never been sent to the stairs before, and all of a sudden, I'd never had my confidence challenged. So then when you're a coach, you could relate, you could understand, and hopefully, also learn to teach all those things because you had to learn it from square one, and it ended up being a good experience, just maybe not in those moments.
I hadn't thought about how hard it was. You were all forwards, right? So I hadn't thought about how hard it would be. I thought it might be easier for a forward to make the transition to 5-on-5 than a guard.
I don't think many defensive players, you said your friend went on, but we had no guards play at UNI. Absolutely.
And my girlfriend did try it for 1 year, and it was just frustrating for her because she'd never shot the ball. In practice, the guards went on the other side, and we went and shot the ball. So she made it 1 year in college, and then decided not to. And then further on, you find the girls that want to play 5-on-5, and that's when it changed.
And Susan, you had no 6-on-6 teammates in your freshman year. Were you the lone 6-on-6 player?
I was it. And the only other Iowan was Jenny Noel Furness, who played 5-player at Muscatine School. So, yeah, it was a steep learning curve for me, but valuable in its own ways. So it was a challenge.
So Coach Bluder, you, as a college coach, got to witness kind of this change happen from 6-on-6 to the 5-player game, and I'm curious how that affected recruiting. Once, in 93, you make the full switch, does that have a big impact, a change on the way that you recruit at the college level?
Yeah, I was coaching at Drake then from 90 to 2000, and I got to coach the woman that was up here, Lisa Brinkmeyer from Hubbard Radcliffe, who was the last Miss Iowa 6-on-6 basketball player, and in that game she's talking about, she scored 62, I think, straight points in that game. She had committed to us already, so I was sitting in the stands real happy about that. But she, marvelous young woman, unfortunately passed away about 1.5 years ago with brain cancer, and just worked at this union for many years, and I recruited her, coached her, and then she coached with me as one of my assistant coaches, and so, but one of probably the best 6-on-6 players, in the last 20 years at least, or toward the end of the 6-on-6 era. But Lisa, again, she was not very good her freshman year at Drake, and it just took her a long time. But when I think Iowa went to 5-on-5, it did open up recruiting to a national, different schools coming in, because now they understood our game. Before they didn't understand it, so they really weren't recruiting our state as heavily. But once we went 5-on-5, people definitely came in from out of state to recruit our athletes.
And I will say, in 1970, the National Endowment for the Humanities conducts a nationwide poll, and 20% of the girls playing sports were from Iowa, nationwide. And so when you think of Iowa's population, this is pretty impressive. This is 2 years before Title IX. So you heard Lynn Lorenzen say it, like I didn't even know that there was a problem because there were so many girls playing basketball. So that was a precedent that was set. But Susan, in 1993, you're finishing your senior season at Lincoln Community. The announcement, they say they're going to take the vote in February, but by March, everyone is said, all of the administrators had said, we're just going to change. This is it. 93 will be the final season of 6-on-6. How was that news received, amongst your teammates, amongst your community in the small town of Stanwood?
Yeah, I was kind of keeping an eye on that because I was kind of hoping it would change before I graduated. I wanted to play the 5-player game, and I knew I was going to go on, and I thought that would have been a valuable experience, but I was kind of watching that, and it just didn't quite happen. I think probably the issue in Lincoln community at the time, as much of that was they were really talking about consolidation with our rivals Clarence and Loudon, which that's makes North Cedar High School now, and that was coming down. And of course, nobody really wants to get consolidated your senior year, especially with your rivals. But I kind of wanted to because of the basketball side. But I think the bigger issue when you talk about the small town, the small community, the rural community was where's the high school? Some town was going to lose that high school and that center of where the basketball is going to be played, where the football games were going to be, and I remember that being a big deal. So in and amongst the whole, is basketball going to change? People were excited about it, but it was very much where is the hub of the high school and small town activity going to be, and yeah, that was a situation facing a lot of small towns at the time too.
So a couple questions as we get to the end of our panel here. One, I want to turn to coaching. So I'm curious what elements of the 6-player game you've brought into your coaching. I mean, Coach Bluder, when I think of the Iowa staff, you've got Jan Jensen, who was a standout. In the same year that Lynn Lorenzen breaks the national scoring record, Coach Jensen is the points per game leader in Iowa. She goes on at Dream to be the national points per game leader. So you've got her, you've got Jenny Fitzgerald, who was Miss Iowa basketball in 1986 for the Lancers. I'm just curious, for all of you, what elements of the 6-player game did you bring into your coaching? Any plays, any particular dynamics?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I feel like spacing, I think, you talked about that a lot. Like, it's so much spacing. And really, when you watch 5-on-5 basketball, a lot of times it is a 2-person game. It's a pick and roll or, and so you're really going back to some of the same elements that you used in 3-on-3 or in half-court basketball. So you still use some of the same elements, but obviously spacing is it's more cluttered, with 5-on-5. And so there's just not as much, you really have to emphasize spacing in 5-on-5 because of the more people on the court.
Yeah, I think probably the element as a coach, you probably sometimes shake your head at is sometimes how many wasted dribbles we used, and let's get the ball moving a little bit. And actually, when you have 2 dribbles, you don't go sideways, you go straight to the rim. You have to. So I think there was some of that where efficiency with the dribble, I could really challenge our kids at the college or the high school level. We play, one day a year. I'd take 20-30 minutes of practice and just teach them. Like, this is how it used to be in Iowa, and then but it was an opportunity to teach about the dribble and how to maximize what you got out of it. So that was kind of a fun way to use the 6-player game when you coached.
I think with Lisa, screen and roll. I mean, basically, that's what you want to do, and then we call it the GG, give and go, get going. And I do remember challenging my 5-on-5 gals that if they could take the ball out of bounds on the opposite end of the court and get it all the way down without taking a dribble, I'd take them to Dairy Queen. Yep. So, they would really try to do that. And really the ball moved a lot faster, so that was probably the biggest transition I did, yeah.
So one last question here before we bring down our administrator to close it out. High schools across Iowa are going to enter their basketball seasons here soon in a couple of weeks. So what advice would you give to young girls, and really anybody who's aspiring to play basketball?
I think on the bottom of my email, I always say, do what you love and love what you do. And I think you've got to love it, you've got to go into the attitude and have fun, and to visualize. I stood out on that little grass court, just like the Lynx last night, and thought, oh, I'm in the state championship and I'm down by 1 basket and I need to make these free throws. So to love what you do and to visualize and always have a positive attitude. Just turn anything negative into positive and believe you can if you think you can.
I think the game, I mean, we talk about, putting the ball through the hoop, but it's so much more than that. And, being a coach and a high school coach in Iowa most recently, I look at the numbers and you see some dips in some of the numbers, and it's for a number of reasons, but I don't want to see girls miss out on the greatness of basketball. It's hard, it's fun, and the team stuff that comes from that. Really, we were talking before too, the relationships that come from the game, the stories we're up here telling. It's so incredibly worth it, and the game is fun while you're in it, while you're young, when you're competing. It's amazing, it's fun, but what you take with you is really the value, and to get young people to continue to see that and invest in that, I just really encourage them to dive in and work at it and invest, and then when you get out on the backside in regards to people and life lessons, it's there isn't a day that goes by that you don't use something from that experience. And I hope I would encourage you that direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think athletics is the best teaching tool, just of life skills, not just basketball skills. So I just would hope that kids would continue to play sports, basketball or whatever it is. And so many times, girls will come up to me and say, oh, I want to play, at Iowa, or I want to play Division I basketball. And to me, it's not about where you play, it's that you get to play, right? And so I don't care if you're playing at Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, junior college, it doesn't matter. What I love is that there is a place for everybody, and no matter what your talent level is, if you really love it and put into it, that girls, have opportunities. It's not just at the Division I level. They should look at all different levels and think they're a success wherever they're playing, because they're learning those same lessons. So I hope they'll continue to play.
What a treat to spend the afternoon talking hoops with some absolute all-stars. Let's give our panel a round of applause.